What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new video on the channel. This is another Yap Fest type of a video, but I feel like there's a bunch of them that I made on the channel over the past, I'll say, a couple of months. People seem to enjoy them when I go on these like kind of little commentary style videos where it has nothing to do with the gameplay in the background, but I just talk about some stuff in the gaming world or in the car world, and people seem to kind of enjoy watching and listening to them. Like the views on them kind of reflect it, and plus the positive comments that I've gotten in the past also do as well. So if you guys enjoy this type of content, then of course show your support, like this video, comment, do whatever it is you guys want to do. Also, this is a discussion type video, so if you guys have any opinions on any of the things that I've said in this video, of course feel free to comment down below. You can, you know, counter argue, or you can agree, disagree, whatever it is that you guys want to do. But yeah, obviously, as you can see by the title and the thumbnail of this video, are video games, even car games, which we're going to be talking about a little bit more, but are video games nowadays dying a lot quicker than they did in the past? So what I mean by that is the game's lifespan, right? It usually comes out, and then in like a year, usually, it gets replaced by the next one from the same franchise, same developer, same whatever, right? Usually it's kind of like every year the developers come out with a new title. I mean, we've seen this a lot with titles such as Call of Duty, such as, you know, FIFA, obviously not being called FIFA anymore, 2K as well. We had at one point even, you know, the Forza franchise, obviously, that has done the exact same thing. There are obviously a few other titles that haven't done that same thing. Titles such as Battlefield. Battlefield is one of them that usually kind of takes a few years, but then when they release a game, it's still being played a lot by people. And then, of course, we also had Gran Turismo, massive one again in the car world. Need for Speed is a very questionable one. Some of them, you know, they kind of drop the ball. They like release maybe like a mobile game, or they release some mad weird updates. Again, nowadays we are usually expected to get a game from the developer every single year. But if you go back a good however many years ago, let's go back, you know, 20 years ago, right? When video games weren't really online, right? I feel like game developers would have to make a game that would last a long time, right? At least 2 years. Like the game developers would have to put together such a big game, and a game that has so many things going on where they can't really update it on the fly. So like if they release a game for like the PS2, for example, you know, there's not really a lot of online connectivity with the PS2, so they'd have to obviously try and cram as much content as possible into those games, and, you know, have content going on for a good few years. So the argument here is, back in the day when you weren't able to have kind of updates and stuff like that being added onto games, how did those games last so much longer, or they feel like they lasted so much longer than the games do nowadays? There are so many games nowadays, which is my very first kind of argument with this, is the gaming world is oversaturated. There is so much to play in all the different genres that you can think of. There are so many different games that you can play for everything, right? People will get bored very, very quickly nowadays because there is way too much going on. So if, let's say, a YouTuber or whatever starts a trend with some game, a content creator, streamer, whatever, they'll start a trend with some game, and even if that game isn't very good, it'll go on up until the trend dies, and then that's pretty much it. There's very few games nowadays that will end up being played years and years and years later. Very, very few. I can think of a few of them off the top of my head right now that have been going on for so long, but that's usually because of their competitive nature. Games like Fortnite. Fortnite is still being played to this day. It's still a competitive type of game. Games like Counter-Strike, games like Valorant. These are all online games that they don't have to release, you know, a new one of them every year or every other year. Basically, all they have to do is kind of update it slightly, change the meta in the game, and then people kind of tweak it. And again, because there's a competitive scene to it, there has to be something to that game that brings people back, you know, and for these games, it's the competitive nature of it. I can't go onto Forza. Just isn't a competitive game. I'm sorry. As much as we wanted it to be, it's definitely more of like a casual game experience for everyone. So you go into the game, you can make it as competitive as you want, obviously by messing around with leaderboards and stuff like that, but overall, in its nature, right now, Forza is a casual game, right? That's just how it is. So I feel like, especially Forza Horizon 5, they have done a good job with continuously updating the game and bringing stuff out for it. So it does actually end up lasting a little bit longer, but I still see comments on my videos saying that Forza Horizon 5 is dead. It's not. It really isn't dead. Maybe you don't play it anymore. Maybe you don't see any interest in playing it anymore as a player. But the game is not dead. If you look at the any sort of like Steam charts or whatever, the game is still going. It still has more players than pretty much any other casual game out right now, or a casual racing game out right now. And even games that have come out years after, this game, Forza Horizon 5, still tops it. It's still up there. So as much as we want Forza Horizon 6 to come out, Forza Horizon 5 is still being played and it's not dead. So there is something around the constant updates and the constant changes where it kind of delays the death of a game, if that makes sense. But if there's a game that comes out and obviously it doesn't get looked after by the developers, there's no updates, there's no care basically taken with the game, so they kind of release it kind of half-assed or like kind of just without that much content in it, the players, the people that will end up buying the game, they quickly will notice and the game will die very quickly. The hype for the game will end up going almost immediately. Games like Forza Motorsport, which doesn't have a massive player base, obviously if we go now to the game and you can have a look at some of the leaderboards and the rival events and stuff like that, you'll be able to see there's like a couple hundred people that are doing it. There are more players right now on CarX Street doing quote-unquote leaderboard stuff than there are in Forza Motorsport. And that's sad because CarX Street is from a much smaller developer and it's a much cheaper game. It is not even on the same league as the Forza series, but people play it more because there's more things to do and it's just a more interesting experience playing the game, you know? So that's what I'm saying. Back in the day, when, for example, when I was a kid as well, like this is my second point on how games back in the day used to last a lot longer than they do nowadays. Back in the day, when you were a kid, I'm speaking from experience here, and I'd start to play video games, it would only be on the weekends or when I'm off from school. So the amount of time that you actually end up playing the game is a lot less than what you think, right? So you may be saying, oh, I used to have so much fun playing games and I used to play them so much more when I was a kid. That is completely wrong. That is completely wrong. You play so much more now as an adult than you did as a kid because you have more free time. And even for people saying, oh yeah, but I go to work, I have to work like 8 hours a day. Yeah, cool. But then you come home and you hop on and you play a video game and you have no bedtime because you can play as much as you want because you're an adult. And you can, you know, on your days off, you can play video games and stuff like that. Whereas as a child, you either, you know, you go to school, you have your homework, and you have to be in bed by a certain time. When you're like on your time off, you know, a lot of the time you go out with your friends, you play games outside, stuff like that. Well, that's what I did anyway when I was a kid. So I didn't really have a lot of time sunk into video games, even though I did play a lot of video games as a kid. But that feels like it makes the games last longer because you don't play them as often and as much as I do now. Right now, especially as a content creator, I can sit down and play a game for 24 hours. Nobody would bat an eye. Nobody would say anything. I can do it and I'll get bored and sick of that game very, very quickly, right? So that's another kind of argument because I feel like the people that are watching my videos right now kind of grew up with some of my content, and of course they watched, you know, some of my videos go from Gran Turismo to Forza to Call of Duty to all that sort of stuff. And yeah, like I said, over the years, obviously, you end up, you know, changing what you like and how much you play it, and of course, you know, that also determines how the game's life goes, right? Again, if there is no interest, if people have less interest in a game, it'll die immediately. You know what's a really, really good game that is perfect for this example? Battlefield 2042, right? Battlefield 2042, when it came out, it was an absolute mess, and so many people hated it, and so many people just kind of hopped on, played it, and realized how horrible the experience was, and they stopped playing it, and the game died. The amount of hype that was behind Battlefield 2042 was insane. Even I was hyping it. I was excited to finally go back and play a modern Battlefield game. But then they got rid of all the cool stuff from the modern Battlefields, and they just ended up with whatever mess was going on in the game at that time. I feel like they've kind of fixed it. They've changed a couple things now with the game, so you can, I guess, play it and have a better experience. But like, you know, like it's way too late. It's years too late now, and I can't see myself going back and playing that game. Like I said, it's just the hype for the game was so massive, and they kind of just they kind of shit all over the expectations of the players, because the players wanted an experience like Battlefield 4, for example. Battlefield 4 was an absolute masterpiece of a game. Yes, it did have its faults at the very beginning, but it was just basically a more fleshed out and a bigger experience than Battlefield 3 was. And Battlefield 3 is still one of my favorite games of all time. I've spent so much time playing that game on console and on PC. It was amazing to play, right? Like, we've had Hardline since then. We've had so many other games. I still think that Battlefield 3 is one of the best games ever released, just in terms of how much fun I've had on the game. And Battlefield 4 is up there as well, but I think because I was a kid at the time when Battlefield 3 was out, the memories that I have with that game are just more, like, I don't know, they just kind of sink into my head a little bit more. And again, I've played that game for so long, and I even downloaded it not that long ago and went back to play it very recently. It's just that good of a game. There are still servers nowadays, however many years later. When did that game come out? Was it 2013? Maybe a little bit earlier, 2011 or something like that. It was early, right? Like, it was a long time ago. And like I said, there are still servers up nowadays for people to play it. So it definitely goes to show with how much less of a kind of a money hungry, I think, corporation EA was back then versus what it is now. I feel like a lot of game developers nowadays as well, they try to create stuff as cheap as possible. They try to think of it as a business instead of a entertainment business, I guess. Because the way they try to figure this out is they try to do everything as cheap as possible. Of course, as a business, that is your goal. You try to do stuff as cheap as you possibly can by still giving out great results. Except they kind of forgot the whole great results part, and they've just do it as cheap as possible. Does that make sense? I feel like that's not even just with game developers. I feel like a lot of companies nowadays are doing the exact same thing. Even car manufacturers are doing the exact same thing. They're all switching to, like, screens everywhere in the car because it's a cheaper way to do it. Copy pasting designs from one to another. It's just a much cheaper way of doing things and feeding the public with the product that just doesn't seem to be finished, and the people have to take it, because what else is there, right? Like, if they come out with like a new Battlefield like tomorrow, people are just not going to be as hyped for it because they know how it was in the past. So I feel like if you do that sort of stuff, if you have that sort of business model where you try to make stuff as cheap as possible and then just feed it out to the public is obviously going to notice, and they're not going to be as as supportive as they maybe would have been in the past for a new product from you. So that also means that because there's a lot less interest in it, it might mean that there's a lot less of a life that the game or the product or whatever may have in the future. So that's a big thing as well. Again, I feel like I veered off from video games, but that is kind of how it goes. Like, the product has to kind of match people's expectations, they have to exceed people's expectations, or at least match them. If they're just worse than what the population or whatever the people expect it to be, it of course is going to flop, and it's of course going to die much sooner. Look at Test Drive, right? Test Drive was hyped up like crazy. We've had betas that were a little bit questionable, but we're all like, oh yeah, but maybe the game, when it comes out fully fledged, it might be a little bit better. And then it came out and it was a bit of a mess, and then it's a big mess, and obviously now nobody plays the game anymore. And it's sad, because Test Drive was a big franchise, but because of how it's been handled and how it was released and all that sort of stuff, it just feels like it's cut so many corners and just kind of fed the public a product that wasn't yet finished, So the game was dead before it even released, to be completely honest. That's how I see it in my eyes. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about in today's video, because I've seen in other videos, obviously, people saying, Forza Horizon 5 is dead, or I've even seen most recently on YouTube is that Car Street is already dying, or it's already a dead game, and I don't see that one. That one I don't really see. Of course, they still have to release content and stuff like that for the game, but like, if they get a game and they play it like a week's worth of playing time in like a month, which is a lot if you think about it. Like, think about, out of a whole month, if you play non-stop a whole week of just the one game, you are going to get so bored of it afterwards, and you're going to get like, because obviously they're not going to release with that in mind. They're going to release that you're going to be able to play the game in your free time when you're not in school or when you're not in work, not when you play it like non-stop. And it's people like content creators that have to come out and say this. No, the game isn't dying. Just stop it. Because there are so many people out there that kind of follow what content creators do. And I think it's a little bit sad. Just play the games that you like. Don't play what's trendy. Just play what you like to play. And I feel like because, you know, content creators come out and they make these sort of videos where this game is dead, you know, stop playing it, go play this game instead, and stuff like that. It's just, it's kind of tone it back a little bit, you know what I mean? But yeah, anyway, that's pretty much for today's video. Let me know what your thoughts are down below with the games industry and how their games are performing, or underperforming, I should say. Do you think games nowadays are dying quicker than before? Do you think maybe it's just the way we are? Maybe it's, like I said, the whole market is oversaturated and stuff like that. Let me know what your thoughts are down below. But that's pretty much it for me. Thank you for watching, everybody, and I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.